Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I am Dr. Gabriel Garcia Ochoa. I am your host for today. Very, very excited to be here. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where we are. The session takes place on the lands of the Wurundjeri People, who are the traditional owners of these lands. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and any Aboriginal elders of other Indigenous communities who may be here today. It's very exciting to be with you today. I'm going to very briefly introduce my fellow panelists. We have Mariana Enríquez, who is one of the prestigious guests of the Melbourne Writers Festival. Mariana is an award-winning Argentine novelist and journalist whose work has been translated into more than 20 languages. She is the author of Things We Lost in the Fire, The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, which was shortlisted no less for the 2021 International Booker Prize, and Our Share of Night, which was awarded the prestigious Premio Heralde de Novela. And this is the fantastic book that she has here at the festival, A Sunny Place for Shady People, translated by Joy Williams. Joy Williams, can we please have a big round of applause for Mariana? I am also joined for this translation slam by Lilit Thwaites, who is an award-winning Australian literary translator and an adjunct professor of contemporary Spanish literature at La Trobe University and the current president of the Australian Association for Literary Translation, AALITRA. Her book-length translations include Crossing Waters, the best-selling The Librarian of Auschwitz, Australian Connection, and Rosa Montero's futuristic Tears in Rain and Weight of the Heart. Her translations of short stories, essays, and the occasional poem have been published in journals and anthologies. She presents sessions at writers' festivals, gives talks on Spain-related and translation topics, and co-organizes visits to Australia by Spanish-speaking writers. In 2016, she was awarded Spain's Order of Civil Merit. And big applause for Lilit. And our other wonderful translators, they'll be on stage in a second, so don't worry, they're here. They're here. You don't need to keep clapping until they appear. Our other wonderful translator this afternoon is Alice Whitmore, a writer and literary translator from Spanish and Italian. Her translation of Mariana Dimopoulos' Imminence was awarded the 2021 New South Wales Premier's Translation Prize. She's also the translations editor at Cordite Poetry and an associate editor at Giramondo. So, big applause for her. And again, Alice will be on stage shortly. So we're here today to celebrate literature, of course, but more specifically, literature in translation. And we are going to celebrate it by asking questions, which is one of my favorite things to do in the world. We live in a world that is global, and it is global in a way that it has never been global before. The way that our economies are interconnected, our mobility, our politics, the flows of knowledge and culture and art. It's always happened, but not in the way in which it happens now. We know that very, very well. Historically, we have never been global in the way that we are now. And this global existence would not be possible without translation, bilingualism, or polyglottism. These are the bedrocks of communication across peoples, cultures, and places. And as with most good things, we tend to take that for granted. Translations, in particular literary translations, are not mechanical processes. They are very careful, very detailed works that involve countless decisions. Each decision that a translator makes brings a gain and a loss. That's the opportunity cost of each translation choice. And the translator needs to have a good argument why that gain was more important than the loss, or more valuable than the loss. This happens at the level of the word, sometimes the syllable, the subclause, the sentence, the paragraph, the chapter, and the book. And so we see how language, syntax, tone, everything collides to serve particular purposes. But that is not gratuitous. There is a cost, and there is a process of choosing each step of the way. The process needs to be detailed and careful because when we cross the borders of language, we also cross the borders of culture. The art of translation gives us glimpses of different cultures, different ways of being, different ways of understanding the world. And when I talk about these differences, I'm not referring merely to straightforward differences. So for example, in some parts of the world we greet by shaking hands, and in others we bow. How quaint and beautiful. That one's easy to get. That's pretty straightforward. But I mean foundational differences. When we talk about differences that challenge our values or that tug at the most intimate elements of our identity. Literature, and literature in translation in this case, pushes us to make that effort to be comfortable with discomfort or excited by the adventure of understanding each other across those differences. So with that in mind, you are here, you're in for a treat. Mariana very kindly wrote a text specifically for this session. She's going to read that text to us in Spanish, so you can get a sense of what that sounds like. And then we're going to look at two translations of the text, one by Lilit and one by Alice. You don't need to be bilingual in Spanish for this session, don't worry. And it's also, I mean, the title slam involves a bit more excitement that there's going to be there. So there's no winner or loser here. It's not about that. It's not about which is the better translation. But it's about understanding the process of translation and getting a glimpse of how that works. Alice and Lilit did not communicate at all when they translated this text, and they didn't speak to Mariana either. Until today, they will not have seen each other's translations, and neither has Mariana. I am the only one who has. So together, we're going to see those translations, and I'm going to ask them about that process of translation and the different choices that they made. So again, it's not about who wins, that's not the point. The point is to get an understanding of the difficult, wonderful, and exciting process of literary translation. So with that in mind, you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from Mariana. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mariana.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I'm small. I think I was supposed to stay there, but I'm chaotic. Thank you. Yeah, you hear your name and say, oh, I had to go. Anyway. It wasn't self-centered, I swear. It was just confusion. Anyway, I wrote this. It's a short story that is a bit sci-fi and a bit sad, which is not usually what I do. I usually do horror and cruel. But I think I wrote it when the pandemic was ending and I was, I don't know, in some kind of a state. Anyway, I'm very excited to see what they do because this hasn't been published in any book. It was only published in a magazine, and it's kind of lost by like the short story. And I'm going to read a bit of it, like 3 paragraphs, and then they can do it. Yeah. Okay. It's Edificio Mayor, piso 10. La luz del cilindro desinfectante es hermosa. Salgo a mirarla todas las noches. Está prohibido permanecer en el balcón del 10º piso, pero la mujer de guardia sabe que yo me arrojaría al vacío. Ni yo ni ninguno de los que vivimos en el edificio mayor. La restricción es un anacronismo impuesto a la primera generación de inmunes, aunque ellos no eran suicidas. Intentaban huir nada más. Nosotros sabemos que escapar es imposible. El edificio mayor es el más cuidado del sector sur y un intento de fuga es reprimido en segundos. Yo, por ejemplo, ni siquiera sé dónde está la salida, si es que tiene alguna. Ignoro si el personal duerme aquí o tiene su propia casa. Como la guardiana sabe que no me arrojaré del balcón, me deja mirar la ciudad al aire libre. En general estoy sola, pero a veces, muy pocas, vienen algunos inmunes a acompañarme. Yo espero solo a NJC. Nunca lo había visto, no estudiamos juntos. La primera vez que lo vi pensé que era una chica, una adolescente, hasta que habló. Se nombra a sí mismo en masculino y su voz es muy gruesa. Sé que eso no significa demasiado, pero cambia totalmente la percepción sobre su aspecto. Es muy delgado porque ya cumplió con 2 donaciones importantes. Tiene el pelo fino y a veces le tapa la cara cuando el viento se lo desordena. Una vez se sacó un mechón de la boca y se rió con una carcajada que yo nunca antes había escuchado. Una explosión de alegría en el silencio del piso 10. Me reí y lloré por primera vez, sorprendida por el sabor salado de las lágrimas. NJC volvió 3 días después al balcón y volvimos a observar el derrotero del cilindro desinfectante. Gira rápido y cambia de tamaño según recorra calles estrechas, avenidas o la autopista. Se adapta. La luz que emite junto al desinfectante que rocía mata al virus que, como se sabe, vive en el aire o al menos se mantiene tantas horas suspendido que casi se podría decir que es su hábitat. Un azul de neón al principio que obliga a cerrar los ojos. La luz atraviesa los edificios transparentes y la ciudad brilla como si estuviera hecha de estrellas. Después, en la segunda fase, el azul se oscurece y es como si pájaros negros descendieran para tocar los edificios y los autos que nunca paran de circular. Caminar fuera de los edificios está prohibido. También está prohibido visitarse, por eso todas las paredes son transparentes y la luz es tan hermosa cuando se vuelve violeta y se combina con las miles de pantallas y las personas iluminadas y la luna roja de la cosecha. Así la llama mi médica, que es una sobreviviente del primer virus y recuerda las historias de sus bisabuelos que vivieron el año 0. Ellos creían que iba a volver la normalidad, dice mi médica. No sabe a qué se refieren con normalidad, nadie lo recuerda. Se destruyeron las películas y el material audiovisual y los libros porque, dicen, la nostalgia por un mundo diferente provoca rebeliones. Hay mitos sobre parques abiertos y sobre caras sin máscaras. A mí me dan risa. NJC dice que es cierto que hace muchos años no se usaban máscaras fuera de las casas porque los virus no vivían en el aire. Pero NJC está débil y cuando los inmunes nos debilitamos solemos imaginar paraísos perdidos. So that's it in Spanish.
And now we're going to welcome Lilit Thwaites and Alice Whitmore to the stage. We're going to go over their translations. I'm going to ask them questions about their choices. You're going to hear from them. You're going to see how when people say, oh, there's only so many ways in which you can translate a text. Really? You think so? Jorge Luis Borges used to say, a text is an innumerable access of meaning, and you're going to see how that works out in practice. So please welcome to the stage Lilit and Alice. Thank you. Can I be a pain and ask you, Lilit, to sit here and Alice there, because your translations go first, Lilit, and then I'm going to freak out otherwise.
Okay.
That's fine. All right, see, otherwise it would have been too much. It would have been too difficult for me. So this is how it's going to work. We have the original, then Lilith's translation, and then Alice's translation, okay? So I want to start with the title of this text, which is Edificio Mayor, Piso 10. 4 words. You know, we're not talking about the unbearable lightness of being. 4 pretty straightforward words. And they weren't the same. So we have 2 different choices here. Edificio Mayor, level 10 by Lilit, and main building, 10th floor. Can you explain to me why you went in these different directions?
I actually started out with main building, 10th floor. And then I thought, I always like to leave some trace of the original language. And I thought, okay, edificio is very like edifice, so most people will be able to guess at what that means. And mayor is sort of like major, and further on, I'll be explaining it anyway in English. So, yeah. So I left it in the original.
I thought, looking at how the text progresses, I'm getting ahead, and I know the text and you don't. I felt like the building is mentioned in the text, and the name of the building is mentioned. The 10th floor is an important element of the text as well. I thought it was a good way to set up the setting. This is a large building, we're on the 10th floor, and that from the very first paragraph is the setting, and that becomes quite important to what's happening. I thought it was important that people got that the way that they did in the Spanish, that they were placed in the same place, and there was no doubt about what was happening there. I also don't feel that this is a particularly... I think the setting is so ambiguous in a way because it is a sci-fi kind of story. Maybe Mariana will disagree, but it felt like it could be anywhere in the world in this kind of strange future. So it didn't really matter to me that it was in Argentina or anywhere else. So
brilliant. All right, let's see how the text flows from here. And one thing that you'll notice, I have actually made a point of highlighting spots in the text where the two texts align, which are so infrequent. They're so infrequent. We have the first slide here. And this is where the differences that I want to point out begin. So, Lilit, in your translation, the ban is an anachronism imposed on the first generation of immunes, although they weren't jumpers, they just tried to escape. And we have Alice's, the balcony rule is an anachronism. It was made for the first generation of immune, so that's not capitalized, sorry, that is capitalized and it's in the singular, although they weren't suicidal either. I wanted to ask about your choices there. So immune, one is capitalized, one is in the plural, then jumpers versus suicidal. Why did you make those choices?
Okay, can you go back to the previous slide for a
Yes,
minute?
of course, yeah.
Okay, so I had actually pointed out there, I said, the female guard knows I wouldn't jump over the edge. So I'd sort of already established that somebody was going to jump over the edge and commit suicide. So I just continued with that notion of jumper, and that's why I used it.
And I should preface for the audience, because you heard Mariana speaking in Spanish, and for those of you who don't speak Spanish, so this dystopian tale is about a future where there are organ donors who are kind of harvested for their organs after there has been a pandemic where people die from this horrible virus. That has led to a kind of totalitarian state that has all these different rules, and technology has surpassed this in very macabre ways. So those who don't follow the rules get killed immediately. To give a bit of context. All right, sorry, thank you.
That's right, yeah.
So you've already established here in the previous paragraph that people can jump and they're suicidal. Yeah.
Well, they're not suicidal.
Sorry?
But
or
they're
not.
not.
Yeah, that's right.
Or not.
But they were
Could be, yeah.
previously in
Yeah.
So my choices, I decided to capitalize immune because, again, and I often kind of go back and change things later. So because there were instances where people were named, like groups of people in this society are named with capital letters. I think there's like the leaders and the guardian maybe, like I can't remember exactly. And it seemed like, and I know that can be a bit of a trope in science fiction where you have kind of these ways of speaking and marking things that are just a little bit, dystopian or authoritarian, that are just slightly different from how we do it. And I thought, because the dystopian elements of this story come in kind of gradually, like you don't know why she's not allowed on the balcony. Well, when you hear the word immune, you're like, okay, something's going on, but you don't yet know how awful this authoritarian situation is. So I thought it was a good way to mark, okay, something is, someone has decided that there's a group of people in this society called immune, and they have a capital, like they're so that was...
And the immune are immune to the virus, and that's why their organs are harvested.
Yes, that's it, yeah.
Everybody else basically dies.
Yeah. So it's a happy tale. And then I've also highlighted this section in Sector Sur, the south sector, as opposed to just the south sector, which you've got there, Alice. So you've got that explanatory subclause there, Lilit. Why?
Well, again, I wanted to keep some of the Spanish, and I could have just left that as Sector Sur, because I think, again, most people would be able to guess at it, but...
Why do you want to keep some of the Spanish?
Well, I just think, for me, the translation should be read in a way that doesn't disrupt the reader because of the English. So there are not things that as they're reading, they're thinking, this doesn't sound right, okay? But at the same time, I want to remind the reader that we are actually in a different world. We are actually coming from a different culture, a different language, and so on. So at times where it doesn't seem to disrupt or interrupt the reading unnecessarily, I just like to put those in, keep them in. Yeah.
And what about you, Alice? You went straight for the south sector.
Yeah, it goes back to the title. The approach that I was taking was, well, I don't think the geographic element is important in this text. It's and yeah, so I was doing the opposite of Lilit. I was thinking, like, I'm working on the setting being this kind of urban dystopian setting, and I'm not going to add in any foreignizing kind of aspects there.
And here actually we're talking about a very basic tension of the translation process, which is whether a translator foreignizes or domesticates a text. Foreignizing means we adhere a bit more to the original in praise of the original, and then we as readers need to do the work and understand that foreignization. Domestication is the opposite. Domestication is when the text is made more palatable to a certain readership, and then we change it. And that's an ongoing tension through any process of translation.
Yeah, and it may vary depending on the book you're dealing with.
Well, that's, yeah, I was going to say.
Or the section of the
I'm
book.
usually more of
Exactly.
I'm usually a foreignizer, but in this case, I'm a domesticator.
And I really like this. So at the end of the paragraph, so this last sentence, which in Spanish is, yo, por ejemplo, ni siquiera sé dónde está la salida, si es que tiene alguna, ignoro si el personal duerme aquí o tiene su propia casa. Lilit's translation is, I, for instance, don't even know where the exit is, or if there is one, and I have no idea if the staff sleep on site or have their own house. Alice, I don't know if the staff sleep here or if they have their own quarters somewhere else. I thought this was an interesting difference because of what it says about the staff and how they live. Can you please tell me a little about why you translated in the way that you did?
Well, I've got my dad here. This is one that I sent to my dad because he's a sci-fi writer actually, and I sent in my whole draft, and I was like, this, I don't know what to do about this, it was this whole section about I don't even know where the exit is, and I had a few different versions of it. So I don't know. This would be one that I would be open to editing again. But the choice of the quarters, I think, was a late choice because it felt, again, a little bit more, I don't know, military, or kind of house seemed a bit cosy for this situation. I just didn't imagine people going home to their houses. When you learn a bit more later, you see the kind of living situations that people have. I mean, there were apartments, first of all, and they have transparent walls and no one's allowed outside, so it's like, house didn't feel right for me. And I just imagined that the staff, especially if they're just perpetually there, it seemed like maybe they just have a little quarters to sleep in or something. So yeah, this was me interpreting and probably adding a little, because the casa in Spanish is there, and that means house.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I love this tension because Lilit, you'll tell us in a second, but as Alice was saying, casa is house. So what Lilit did was to be loyal to the translation.
I guess it was also the thought that in a sense, the guards and the people who look after the immunes are sort of a group apart. They're not the ordinary citizens who die and so on and so on. So I sort of thought, okay, possibly they do have, somewhere different. That's not one of these transparent apartment buildings that they live in.
Yeah.
So I think that was partly my thinking.
And look, for the purpose of the text, both work, and they're really interesting. But you see how one choice gives us a different tone for the story. So Alice, and the text starts bifurcating now. So Alice is giving us this very dystopian sense of people don't have homes, they have their quarters. And Lilit is saying they have homes and we have a different stratification of society. That's just one word choice, which is amazing.
Yeah. I actually like Alice's.
Yeah.
Oh, I like this.
This happens all the time.
Yeah, we can still change it, right?
Yes. All right. So, Lilit, would you mind reading the sentence there, the one that starts with the only one I wait for, up to the end of the highlight?
The only one I wait for is NJC. I'd never met him before. We didn't study together.
Yeah, fantastic. And then, Alice, would you mind reading yours?
The only one I hope to see is NJC. The first time I saw him, I thought he was a teenage girl until he spoke.
Okay, so I find this very interesting. Waiting versus hoping.
Well.
I thought you were talking about the fact that I moved a whole sentence.
Oh yeah, I'm getting there. That's in the next slide.
It's still in
We're
there.
getting there.
It's a sentence later.
But again, hoping versus waiting. That tells us about that's a different psyche, all right? So I'd love to hear about what do you think about this?
Well, esperar is both
That's the
in
problem.
Spanish.
Yeah.
Esperar in Spanish can be either to hope or to wait for.
Yeah.
And of course, I originally wrote wait, I think, the only one I wait. And then when I learned a little bit more about their relationship, I thought there was definitely emotion and attachment there. So I thought hope kind of, transmitted a bit more of that.
See, I used wait because I figure, okay, she talks about the first time, so it's clearly not the first time, so it's obviously someone that she has spent time with already.
Yeah.
And so maybe it is that, I'm up here waiting for them.
You're waiting in the hope that they'll turn up, because they don't always turn up.
Yes.
So
That's right.
I
yeah.
think hope contains the waiting. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. You're there on the balcony hoping to see them, waiting for them to hopefully turn up. But I think it just adds a little bit more of that emotion.
This wasn't going to be slammy, and it looks like it may be. Which one is better?
I'll fight you.
I didn't think we were going to go there, but maybe we will. And then, indeed, Alice. So I've never met him before. We didn't study together. That's not there, but it's there on the next paragraph. So you move that to the next paragraph. And again, it's not, it's not, oh
well,
my
it's
God.
the same
How dare you, Alice?
paragraph.
How would you, sorry?
It's the same paragraph.
It is the same paragraph. It's a different order, though,
It's
in
just-
how that comes in the text.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Why did you deviate?
Well, I thought it sounded a little bit strange to say, the only one I hope to see is in JC. I'd never seen them before. It just seemed like a little bit like, oh, how, the seeing, I think the repetition of, I hope to see them, I'd never seen them before, was just a bit, what's happening time-wise. So I wanted to talk about the first time I saw them, and then go back to saying I'd never seen them before. I don't know, it's... It probably doesn't make that much difference, but when you're doing something like this, you tend to agonise over things like this.
The chronology of the way in which one thinks may tell us something about the character.
Yeah.
It may not, but it may. And I thought that perhaps you had something in mind when you were changing that chronology. And Lilit's translation adheres to the order of the original as well. Also, may I say, my job is very easy, because they were the ones who weeks ago sat down and went through this. I'm just sitting down and asking questions, which is great. But they made the hard choices here. Then at the end or close to the end of that paragraph, we have... I'm reading Lilit's translation. He once removed a lock from his mouth and roared with laughter in a way I'd never heard before, an explosive joy in the silence of level 10. Alice's translation, one time he pulled a long strand out of his mouth and laughed, and the sound was like nothing I'd ever heard before. An explosion of joy cracking open the silence of the 10th floor. Different poetic choices here. And I'd love to hear about what you were thinking when you were translating this. If you remember, again, very difficult to remember what you were thinking 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. But what do you think now that you see those two translations?
Now that I see those two translations, I think Alice is a poet. And she is.
Yeah.
And poetry is the last thing I would ever choose to translate, because I think you probably, not always, but I think you'd have to be a poet to be able to do a good translation of poetry, which I'm not.
But you have translated poetry, Lilit.
I have. I've struggled with it, but I have done it, yes. But I think that's a perfect example, actually. I really like that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. This is just the way that I translate. I think by now I'd started to get a feel of the voice, and it just kind of comes out that way. I don't know.
Look, you can see how it would be so silly to say one is wrong and one is right. They're different for different reasons. They're good for different reasons.
Mine is more wrong, technically. I mean, it's
But it sounds
line
nice.
to line. Yeah, it's
Alice, that's not how the
wrong.
slam works. You're slamming yourself. If anything, you're meant to slam Lilit. All right. Let's move on to the next one.
I'm starting to get nervous here. There's a lot more pages coming.
Now, at the end of this paragraph, we're talking about the virus, okay? and the workings of the virus. And I want to read, again, I'm going to read, oh, actually, Lilit, would you mind reading yours first, starting from the light it emits?
Okay.
Yeah.
The light it emits, combined with the disinfectant it sprays, kills the virus, which, as is well known, lives in the air, or at least remains suspended there for so many hours that you could almost say that's its habitat.
Now, Alice, would you mind reading yours, please?
Mm-hmm. The light it emits, along with the disinfectant it sprays, kills the virus, which, as we know, lives in the air, or at least remains suspended in it for long enough that you could almost say it lives there.
Okay. That's its habitat versus it lives there. Again, the tone changes here very interestingly. Can you tell me about your choices here? Lilit is being, it's so far, you're adhering more to the original. Alice, you're deviating.
More faithful.
Yeah.
I'm not very faithful as a translator.
I guess for me, habitat sort of sounded as if it's here. It's established.
Yeah.
This is its place.
Great.
I guess that's why I stuck with habitat, I think.
Yeah, I think habitat does work. I think I've lost something by losing habitat.
And as you can see from the original, that's also the word that Mariana used. Yeah.
I think I just thought it, because just the way that it flowed with the rest of the sentence, lives in the air, or at least, you could almost say it lives there. It just kind of made this long sentence with lots of commas in it a little bit easier to follow and just rounded it off a bit nicer.
I thought it was really interesting. For me, it gave the virus a certain agency. It turns the virus into an interesting character here. It makes it a bit more macabre, I think. It lives here as opposed to passively having its habitat.
I totally intended that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is very good. The author versus the literary critics.
Yes,
Always. Yeah. That's where I was going, of course. Now, ladies and gentlemen, hang on to your pants, because we have the same sentence. Actually, it's a subclause, not a full sentence, but it's a subclause. Then, in its second phase, the blue darkens, and then it changes.
Oh no, I said the second phase, so...
Then, in the second phase...
And
oh my God, I didn't see that. Yeah. So, scrap
Still
that. That didn't work. No. Right when I thought we had it. Now, in this paragraph, I found the different choices of punctuation very interesting. So, can you tell me why you went in the direction that you did? So, as you can see in Lilit, we've got, I'll read that. Walking outside the building is prohibited, so is visiting each other, which is why the walls are transparent, full stop, and the light is so beautiful when. Alice says, walking outside is forbidden, and so is visiting other buildings, which is why all the walls are transparent and the light. Now, we've switched now, this argument of fidelity that we had. If you see Mariana's original, you have a very long flowing sentence, which is not unusual in Spanish. This happens all the time in Spanish. Not so often in English, of course, I'm generalizing. And here, Lilit was the one who deviated from that. And Alice was faithful to it. So may I ask about your syntactic choices here?
Okay, there is a typo. It is supposed to be a semicolon after prohibited.
So I got that
No,
wrong.
no, that's my typo. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it is partly that thought that we tend not to have long sentences that go on and on and on in English, which we do have in Spanish. And it's a question of, okay, is the reader going to tire of this long sentence and forget what was at the beginning or whatever? Should I let them have a little pause somewhere and keep going? And it's always a dilemma because...
And that's the tension about foreignizing or domesticating that we were talking about, or one instance of that, right?
And sometimes, I think the flowing sentence and the long sentence is part of the whole being of the author.
Yeah, of course.
There
you can't have also Spanish, the patriarch
there are Spanish
with short sentences.
There are novels that are, one sentence sort of thing. So I think it does depend, and in this case, somehow it just,
What about you, Alice?
Yeah, I mean, I usually will break things up if I think it's unwieldy and not helping. But this felt different. It felt more like she's almost, I don't know if she's a she or not, the narrator, but I see her as a she. She is kind of going off on a little train of thought. You know, it just felt like unusually long. Yeah, and it's almost stream of consciousness. Yeah.
Okay.
Although I didn't, you've highlighted also the M dash that I put in because I love an M dash. But that felt like a good way to kind of stop with all the commas and but continue the sentence.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Really?
a little bit of, change it up a little bit just to make it not too long.
Now, they make me laugh.
We got that right.
The first
Where's
one.
this? Oh, this
Straight, same, it's the exact same sentence. Big round of applause for sameness, which never works. And we are 10 slides in. All right, 11 slides in, sorry. Okay, so the next paragraph. Here we've got interesting linguistic choices. So we've got sueltos versus strays, protesters versus Protestants, and later on, brave versus valuable. And sorry, I didn't highlight valuable in Alice's. We're talking about people who escape here. So the sentences are, they are used to trap the sueltos, those on the loose, especially the protesters, who want to liberate us, who believe that our fate is unjust. And then Alice's, the job is to catch strays, and most importantly, to hunt down Protestants. The Protestants, and we keep going. So, do you recall what you were thinking when you made these choices?
I did actually have Protestants at one point because you're talking about what they believe in. And so it sort of almost sounded like a religion.
Yeah, of course.
And then, in a sense, because what they're doing is they are protesting. Yeah, they're protesting against what's happening to our society, what's happening to us, and so on. So in the end, I decided to stick with protesters.
Interestingly, in Spanish, they're the same. It's the same word.
Yes.
Protestante would be both for the Christian
and I went
faction
back and forth on this.
Yeah.
But I think, in line with that approach of, you know, I think in this society there's names for people, and I think Protestants, it sounds like something that they would say. And also a protester carries its own set of meanings in English that, you know, you're out, you know, with a banner or something, whereas these people are kind of working underground, and they're kind of like a little subsection of society themselves. So I went with Protestants, but I didn't capitalise it because I didn't think that they were official enough to have
To have a capital.
Okay.
Yes. Well, that would immediately make people think of.
And that would be too much like Protestant.
Yeah.
Good choice. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Now, towards the end of this slide, we mules are very small in number and very brave, and versus there aren't many of us, so we're extremely valuable.
Yeah.
Brave versus valuable.
Well, valiente. I hadn't even thought of valiente as being.
I mean, I think they are valuable. I mean, they are valuable
and they're
for
brave.
people, but they are also incredibly brave. Not necessarily by choice. They aren't really given a choice about being brave. But at the same time, you know, they could jump over the balcony, put an end to it.
So we've switched again. Alice is being more faithful to the original here, and Lilit is deviating. And by doing that, you're giving the characters a slightly different tone, a slightly different personality. All right, brilliant. Let's move on.
I'm interested to know why you said sueltos.
Why? Yes.
Yeah. Strays versus
Well,
sueltos.
again, and in this case, because I didn't think it would be obvious, and I debated, in fact, I think possibly I did have it in italics, I can't remember, but I figured, okay, here, the reader's going to need an explanation. So I actually added those on the loose. Right, so you have a bit of both. Again, partly because I just wanted to hang on to a bit of the original, I guess.
But you didn't want to keep protestantes in, that could have been a good one.
Nope.
Just wondering.
Oh, you know, you pick and choose.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to know if there's some reason.
In this next slide, it was interesting. I saw Alice reiterated the subject in this sentence. So if we look at the paragraph that Lily started, the protesters believe that this inability to clone us is a matter of divine intervention, a miracle, and that it's our right to live in the world. Alice wrote, the Protestants believe that cloning fails because of divine intervention, some kind of miracle. They believe immune have the right to live in the world. Look, maybe it isn't, it's just something that you thought, but I just thought it was interesting that you reiterate that subject there.
The they.
Yeah, you mentioned the immune again. They believe immune.
Oh, immune, right, yeah. Yeah, I think it was needed. Oh, I mean, it could have said we. I thought it was needed for clarification if I was going to break up the sentence.
Okay.
And yeah, I just liked it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very often that is the case. Sounded good.
Yeah, I was worried. I was worried that this whole thing was just going to be me saying, I just thought it sounded good. Because that's pretty much how I work.
Now, I'm curious why you didn't either make it they believe immunes or the immune.
Because I've gone with immune being their, that's their name.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
as established, I think, in the first kind of paragraph up there.
All right. Some interesting choices here as well. So we're talking about broadcasters. We're talking about what is happening in this society. And Lilit spoke about them as diffusers. You see the original is diffusores. The broadcasters, you have an explanatory parenthesis here, comma, like you did before with the South sector. And Alice refers to them as transmitters.
Just liked it.
We're getting to that stage of this lamp.
No, I just, yeah, there's options. I mean, diffusers I thought sounded too much like a wheel diffuser. Broadcaster is a good option is a good option, I think. It just felt like a little bit dystopian transmitter, you know, because kind of like they're not fully human.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and it just, that was the one that I went with.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to remember what I was thinking at the time. But I guess diffuser, in a sense, also is that notion of viruses and sprays and diffusing stuff. And I guess that's probably partly. In this case, it was information, but it's actually connected with what's happening in the world, I guess.
Or misinformation. Whether, information is being relayed here in the wrong way, whether it's infecting people. I was thinking maybe you'd gone along those lines, all right, now, the leaders. I was very excited. Same term.
Yeah, well, I mean.
Same term.
Líderes.
And as you said, there's ongoing capitalization of certain groups. So jefes on the far left, then leaders and leaders. Now, we almost had the same sentence here at the top. It's just the punctuation is different. I don't know where California is. I could find out, but maps don't interest me. I don't know where California is, semicolon, I could find out, but maps don't interest me. Very unusual that we would have this. But now, what I thought was very interesting was the choices you made. So what's happening here is that the character is recalling the names of places that have disappeared and how strange they sound. And they're talking about Buenos Aires, good air, Finland, the end of the earth, and Vietnam. So I thought it was very interesting how you explain what each of those places mean, and I was wondering if we could talk a little about that.
Well, I, again, because I haven't been placing this translation in Argentina or any Latin American, there's no kind of clues as to where it is. I thought we're going to need to explain the meaning of Buenos Aires, and the reason why Finlandia sounds in Spanish like fin end of landia. I thought that wouldn't be obvious to people who don't speak Spanish. So I thought this is somewhere I need to add extra information.
So we had this explanatory subclause here, because Buenos Aires means good air. Yeah. What about
I
you,
debated about whether to translate good air, given that that's an important element, but for some reason I didn't. Can't think why, but I didn't. And I actually thought there was something in the narrator asking herself that question. Does the earth have an end place? That I wanted to keep that notion.
Talking about
in
Finland,
there.
because
that's
that's
talking
in the
about
original.
Finland.
So Finlandia, la tierra tiene un lugar final. Finland has the earth. Earth has a final place. So again, you were faithful here to the original. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I could have even included that still, which I didn't, but I could have added that in somewhere.
Yeah. You've got it there. Yeah, like it means the end of the earth.
But not the question
Oh, the
element.
question.
Yeah,
Correct.
like, is there such a place?
Yeah, I could just sort of
something like
imagine her
that?
thinking, is there really such a place?
Yeah. So there's loss in mine for sure, as well.
That's right. I left out good air.
We're both losers.
All right. Nothing in this slide. The next one. So the sentence is, there are virtually no active protesters left, just the same. The red race sweep the streets every night. They detect uncontrolled physical movement. And Alice says there are almost no active protestants left. Still, the red race roam the city there every night, detecting unmonitored movements. Now, uncontrolled versus unmonitored. Again, I thought the tone was very different here. What can you tell me about those choices? One gives me panopticon vibes.
Well, uncontrolled seemed too ambiguous to me. Like, uncontrolled movement could be like dance, whereas I figured what they're really talking about with controlar here is checking. Are they watching? Are they like monitoring?
But that could be the meaning of uncontrolled. So they haven't, they're not watching that one in the same way.
I thought it had another element or possible reading, uncontrolled, that was why I didn't go with that one.
Again, Lilit was being faithful to the text here, which is controlados as well. So the Spanish is controlados, and you used uncontrolled as well. However, interestingly, unmonitored, when I read it, that gave me 1984 vibes.
Yeah.
That's what I was feeling.
Yeah, that was what I was going for. Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts, Lilit?
Yeah, I mean, I actually like unmonitored.
There are probably other options too.
Yeah.
That
I guess it's just that notion of, something. They're constantly being monitored or controlled because they are also being controlled.
Of course.
Well, monitoring isn't as controlling as controlled. It's not as controlling is. I see it and I'm making you do it a certain way. So it's even more authoritarian. So it's maybe better in some ways. But
see, it all depends what you mean by controlled.
Yeah. Look, and this is one of the beautiful things about translation. It's not a science. But the moment you choose one word over another, it's like when you're playing with watercolors and you drop one, you let one loose drop of red in water, and all of a sudden the water goes a bit red. Or it goes a bit blue. Again, a word like this.
And then you think, do I put one more in? But then I can't go back. Yeah, we at least can go back.
All right, let's look at the final sentence in this paragraph. Not everyone is happy with a life of confinement and transparency and screens and transplants, he told me. Not everyone is satisfied with a life of confinement and screens and transparent walls and organ transplants. So again, we've got a difference here, which I think changes the tone. Transparency versus transparent walls. And in fact, I think, Lilit, you went the way that Alice went in the previous slide. You're talking about this idea of control, transparency, but here is a forced transparency because, I don't know if we mentioned this, everyone lives in buildings that are completely transparent. And this is part of the monitoring that takes place in the society. So here, I think you went in that direction, and you spoke about those transparent walls, Alice, which to me do not denote control in this particular instance.
Well, they do and they don't. I mean, you have no privacy. I mean, that's all part of privacy and control.
Correct.
I just thought it was clarification, really, because we talked about the light moving through the transparent buildings and I know transparency on its own is a little ambiguous, like it can be kind of a conceptual word as well, you know. So I just wanted to make it explicit because what you would be upset with is the fact that you have no walls and no privacy. That would be the thing that would make you dissatisfied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess transparency for me picked up that notion that because the walls are transparent, virtually everything you're doing, you know, it's all there to be seen.
True. So you've kind of, I've got less of that kind of, the extra meanings of transparency in there, which, you know, is in the original, they're just transparencia with all of its baggage there.
I thought it was very interesting that in the previous slide you went in a certain direction tonally, and now Lilit did the same in this slide.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's there in the text.
Yeah, but I guess it also highlights that the whole time you're translating, the brain's whirring, and you're going one way, another way. Sometimes you suddenly think of something that you hadn't thought of before. I mean, obviously we all have endless drafts and so on, and you're fixing and going back and changing. But sometimes, I don't know, it just felt right at that moment.
There's always a choice, and that choice connotes an inevitable gain and an inevitable loss. And you cannot have a little footnote that says, by the way, I also thought that transparency.
Another good option would have been.
Yes. And fortunately, the people reading the translation won't have read the original.
Yeah,
so
For more information, check my 15,000 word blog.
Yes.
Which my mum really likes. All right. The end of this sentence. I don't understand why being isolated with a screen isn't desirable if it's a matter of natural circumstances. But I don't understand how being alone with a screen could ever be undesirable. It's the most natural thing in the world. So the syntax changed here a little, the punctuation, and then it's the most natural thing in the world versus it's a matter of natural circumstances. What do you think about these choices?
Lo más natural, the most natural. Just thought the way that comes out in English is the most natural thing in the world to me. But I didn't like the C. I didn't want the if.
I know. So that was one of those sentences that I highlighted in yellow because it was very hard to figure out exactly what and how to put it together, quite frankly.
Yeah, because if you're going with
C,
something...
which is in the original. Sorry, I'm just pointing out, you said you didn't like the C, which is in the
The
original.
C sort of
Si se trata lo más de
That if makes you
because
have to think of...
adding the if in would have made it sound too Spanishy when I've gone with something very idiomatic in English. So it would have been just a bit weird. Yeah.
It's a great way of closing the paragraph, right?
I thought it was, I think it's punchy because it makes people think, oh God, I spend a lot of time on my screen. It's so unnatural, you know.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking there was, and possibly partly because of the if, I'm thinking, well, that's what they have now. That's what their life is, and so for them now, it is natural circumstances. They have no other option in a way.
Correct. Okay.
But it's still a weird sentence.
It is.
Some interesting choices in this paragraph, and we're almost at the end of this part of the session, by the way. So here we've got wandering body versus someone. Then we have lo encontró, it found it versus absent. And then the original parecía tantearlo versus different choices. It found it and the light surrounded the body. So I thought there was a lot going on here, and I wanted to ask you about those first choices. So first, trapped a wandering body, someone. Very different choices.
Yeah. I think, when you're dealing with these lights and things,
by the way, these are lights that kill people who are doing what they shouldn't be doing.
They find them, and then the blue ones find them, and the red ones zap them, basically. Yeah. So I guess for me, in a way, you're dealing with these lights, and that was partly why I then switched to it found it. I made everything, so it's no longer a person. it's now become a thing that we're going to find and catch and explode, basically. So I think that was partly why I had body rather than someone.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I wanted... I've kind of tried to add in the wandering aspect with stray body, which is just above the second highlight, to add that, that it's someone who's stray, which is a word that I've used previously to denote people who are out when they shouldn't be. I guess maybe I didn't think too much about personifying this person, as someone when they're not...
Well, they're not seen that way in the
They're
text.
not seen that way.
There's a process of dehumanization, clearly.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to read the next sentence. NJC excited took my hand and we watched the strange dance of the red light with the body. It found it, it encircled it, it seemed to size it up, touch its shoulders, then its back. Now, the original says, lo encontró, lo rodeó, parecía tantearlo. We already listened to Lilit's translation. And then Alice says, the light surrounded the body. Now, I thought this was very interesting because the word tantear in my direct translation of that would be something like palpate.
That was the rodeo, the sizing it up is the tantear, right?
Yeah, correct.
Which I've got.
Correct, and it was very interesting how you each chose to describe that process of palpating differently.
Yeah, and the other thing, and again, when you look at the light surrounded the body rather than encircling, for me, again, encircling suggests that this poor thing, hasn't got a chance anymore. It's got it.
Yeah. Encircled is good. I like it. The reason, by the way, I deleted finding it, lo encontró, it found it, was because I'd gone with the stray body is fixed in the beam already, so it's already been found. So I got rid of the finding it.
And then at the end of that paragraph, when the light makes the body explode, Lily, you had precisely that. It made it explode. And Alice, you had the body exploded. And here I found the difference in agency quite interesting as well, because of the dehumanizing thing that we're looking at.
Yeah, in yours is more...
Yeah, I've just got the it all the way through, so it's the thing doing what's happening. And it makes the body explode. I think that's the whole point for me.
All right. Now, I thought there were some very interesting linguistic choices here and different syntax. Would you mind reading yours, Lilit?
They could kill it. They could kill in other ways without this shower of blood and entrails, NJC explained to me. But it would be less spectacular. It wouldn't teach a lesson.
And Alice, would you mind reading yours, please?
They could kill them another way, NJC explained. The gruesome mist of blood and viscera is a deliberate spectacle, a lesson. Yeah, I just went.
It's much more direct. Yes, yours is.
The brevity of the poet.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on those different choices?
I like shower. I had rain, because lluvia, and then lluvia is in it again later with the blood mixing with the rain, and I'm like, we can't have gruesome rain and then have the rain. But shower,
Yes, sometimes you have to, because you don't want to repeat words.
I went with mist. But
Yeah.
I don't know, it felt like that's how I was visualising it, just this kind of like, just obliterated pulp. Body, gross thing. This is where we get the horror finally that we're expecting from Mariana. I don't know. I thought sometimes when I go rogue, it's because it's like this is powerful and I need to treat it like a writer rather than. So I wanted it to have an impact, and that's what I was going for. Yeah.
And obviously, Alice, I'm in no way suggesting that there's anything wrong with that. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
This is a creative process. And sometimes you go with your gut, and obviously it's part instinct, it's very critical as well. I'm not saying that it's just a gut thing, but in what strange, indescribable ways inspiration works, who knows? But if it works, it works.
Yeah. Sure. As long as the author's not too annoyed at you.
Well,
that's when you get back the letters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
And
is also a strange way of doing it in that you don't have any contact with the author. You can't check things. You can't run it by anyone.
Yeah.
So maybe I made some decisions that I thought.
and as I said, it's very easy for me to sit here and question your choices. You were the ones in the hot seat back then.
Right.
And I know this is the continuation of the text, nothing in particular here, and we make it to the end of the text without anyone being turned into...
just go back one
pulp,
slide so they can see what happens to this poor NJC.
Sure.
Oh yeah, this is so sad.
Yeah.
Do you want to read that, Lilit? NJC
I cried translating this, I have to say. It was so sad.
It was.
Yeah.
That night, NJC made me promise that at our next get-together, I would describe in detail where the cylinder was wandering, what play of lights it was making, if the red rays found any rebel, if the moon continued to be blood red and enormous. I understood that he was asking me to do this because his next donation was approaching, and I was overjoyed because I learnt that he was only going to surrender his corneas, so we still had time.
Alice, do you want to read yours?
Okay,
sure. Let's see if we get a
Let's
similar
see
reaction.
which one gets a better ooh.
Oh, that's not fair. You've prompted them.
That night, NJC made me promise that when I next saw him, I would describe for him in great detail the path of the cylinder, the patterns of the lights. I would tell him if the red rays caught astray, if the moon was still enormous and bloody in the sky. I understood that he was asking me this because his next donation was approaching, and I was happy because he would only be giving up his corneas, which meant we still had time.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty heartbreaking.
See, they already had heard it, so they knew what was coming.
Is this where we get out the swords? And
Yeah.
right.
Now we get to the end of the slam. No one has been turned into a gruesome pulp, which is wonderful. And we have a final sentence, still very different, but both very powerful and very beautiful. Would you like to read yours, Alice? Let's start with yours.
There were still nights left for us to stand together on the balcony, breathing the poisoned air that cannot kill us.
And Lilit?
There would still be nights together on the balcony for us, breathing in the poisoned air which can't kill us.
All right, and that's it, ladies and gentlemen. So, as you can see, nothing straightforward about this process, nothing easy. Now we're going to, Mariana is going to join us on stage. We're going to ask Mariana a couple of questions, and then it's going to be over to you, and you can ask any of our three wonderful panelists questions. And by the way, I wanted to say there's something semiotic about my jumper, because this is how I feel when I translate.
There should be a little question mark at the end,
Yeah,
I think.
it's telling. That's why I wanted to wear it. Mariana, you have been translated many times, but never like this. So tell us, what did you think when you were listening to these different ways of interpreting your text, the different choices? What was that like?
Okay, I felt really under the lens.
Yeah.
I feel like they write much better than me. And that something I always feel about translators. First, that there is absolute... I'm very grateful to translators because they really worry about the text much more than authors do. They do. They think, because in the process of writing, the creative process of writing the original version, let's say in your language, it has a lot of drafty feeling. Like you end it, at some point you stop correcting it, and you give up things that maybe are not perfect, because it also adds to the text some roughness. But the translator has to do it for somebody else, so he has to look at things in a much more, let's say, objective way. For example, with the immunes, I just meant that they didn't get the virus, okay? That's it. And then, because because it's sci-fi. In sci-fi, you know that they. I don't write sci-fi often because it's very difficult, and I shouldn't. And sometimes they use words like that, like the the beings, the creatures, and they're capitalized.
Yeah.
So basically, both are right.
Yeah.
Because, but I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. It was like,
But I would challenge any translator to say that they don't spend countless hours trying to figure out meaning, just like you were saying. You reminded me of a film, I think it was a Monty Python film, I can't remember, where two people are talking about a movie they watched, and one says, what do you think was the meaning of the Rolls Royce? And the other one says, I think it's a car.
I think it's a car. Yeah.
We are very much like that in literary studies and translation.
Yeah. To agonize over things.
But many times I don't agonize about it because I'm used to it, and I think the translators are privileged readers in many ways. And but sometimes I listen to the translators talking, or sometimes when the translators have contact with me and send me questions, and I'm like, oh, that was a mistake.
So tell us that.
Yeah. It was a mistake. I can't remember now, but but it's like, oh no, that wasn't the. Yeah, I should chose a different word for that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, how many languages have you been translated into, Mariana?
I think now about 30. But there's many in Europe that Slovenian is not that impressive.
I mean, you speak several languages, right?
I speak French, though the French don't think so.
Yeah, that's your problem.
I speak English with a bad accent, and I understand Portuguese and Italian.
Great. So you can read those translations, to different degrees. But what happens when your work is translated into a language that you don't speak?
I don't look at it.
You don't? Well, I mean, and what would happen if you do? Nothing.
And
I
you
just
hope,
look at the cover.
Yeah, okay.
and you hope you don't get a message from your friend who does speak the language saying, that translation in X, it's terrible.
I have, this is actually a good story in Serbia for some reason. I have two publishers. But no, I can have two publishers sometimes, but sometimes one translates non-fiction. I write a lot of non-fiction. It hasn't been translated into English, but I do. And the other one, fiction, because it's more logical. In Serbia, there's two different translators for fiction. Don't ask me, I have to ask them what's going on. And clearly there's not that many literary translators that is different to any other translator. Literary translators from Spanish to Serbian, because, and they are quite bitchy. Like they don't tell me, but I know other people. Yeah. And they're like, this one got it much better than the other one. And it's like, what? And so I don't know.
No intrigue the intrigue of the literary translation.
There's no way I can know. There's
of course.
There's absolutely, also it's Cyrillic. It's not even the same alphabet. Yeah. So I have no idea. I don't know how it sounds. And you have to, I don't know, you really have to let go.
And that must be a difficult process as an author at times, to just let go. Or is it easy?
Really.
No? Maybe.
No, and it is
I'm
interesting.
saying more about myself than about
not really. Maybe for some writers it is. For me, it's not, because I'm very used to written translation, and I always loved that work, and I understand that it's not perfect. I understand sometimes it has to maybe be fast. Maybe there's not that. I mean, I can't really get upset because I don't understand, and will never understand the Hungarian translation, because I'm, grateful enough that there is one. It's crazy. Why? No one. And who is this woman? She's called Marta. She's absolutely obsessive. Many translators I don't even know. The book comes out and I receive it in the mail, and it's like, oh wow, this never heard of it. But Marta from Hungary, it's absolutely obsessive. And she sends me these long questionnaires, and she's one of the ones that I'm like, oh God, I made a mistake. And she's very like a teacher, and she's like, I thought so. Like, wow. Yeah.
We should have had Martha from Hungary in the past.
That would be a real joust.
Yeah, that would have been a joust, that's right. That would have been a real slam.
No, I was just going to say
Questions
that...
from you, please, to
No, I was just going to
Mariana as
say that occasionally a writer, and I was interested in what you were saying about your reaction, the writer will write back and say, look, you know, I honestly can't remember, and I'm working on my next one, and I really, you know, I trust you. And you think, oh.
Well, I was going to say something about trust as well, because, you know, when you're reading a translation or when you've been translated into a language that you don't speak, it's such a, must be such
trust.
a, you know, a process of trust on the publisher's trust and you, you know, by proxy, trusting this person to understand it properly, to do their best, and to. So I think that weighs on me as a translator. Is, you know, I take that very seriously. But you know, as you say, translators do take things very, very seriously when often, you know, it's not even that important, the word that they're fussing over. You know.
It happens with many that they fuss about the word, and it's like I don't know.
just choose one.
Just choose
Yes, it's your language, you know.
Do whatever you want. But I'm very. I'm very fortunate that my translator in English is a friend, and she lived for a very long time, Megan McDowell, in Chile. That helps me a lot because first, of course, Spanish is a massive language spoken by a lot of people, and usually when you have a book that does well in Spanish because it got an award or whatever, sometimes you get translated first to other Romance languages, Portuguese, French, Italian. But when you get picked in English, that kind of opens the door to all the rest.
Yeah.
Because it's like the lingua franca of all the rest of the... what I mean is that if you want to publish in Korea, it's kind of difficult that they're going to translate it from the Spanish or from the French, but if it's in English, it's different. And also at this point of the industry, as much as it could be industry for literature, but there is, it's important also to them to have the cover, how it looks like. I have a novel that has a big hand on the cover, so everybody has the big hand on the cover, and I'm always like, why is the hand? Anyway, I love it. I love the cover, but there's so many things to pick, and it's the hand, so I know everybody sends me hands. Anyway. But it opens that kind of thing. So that translation, the English translation, is very important because English and Spanish are very different, as you could see. It's different. I can tell a translation in French or whatever what it is, but it's really transparent. In English, no. So it really depends. And sometimes they translate from English because you can't find a translator that knows the language as good as literary translator. I insist, it's not someone I can read, but can translate it. So they take it from the English version directly. So that's a very important one. And the fact that she lived in Chile means that she understands a lot of nuances that doesn't have to do with the language, but with the culture. And Latin American culture, especially from the south of the continent, is not the same. We're not the Caribbean. So many people, it's no one's fault. It's just the way things are. We don't have information about many places in the world. I don't know anything about Timor. It's okay, but it's a fact. And many people think of Latin America and they think Caribbean, and also because of Garcia Marquez and boom. And we are not like that, like at all. It's cold. It's depressing. It's not exactly depressing, but it's more like Buenos Aires looks more like Melbourne than Bogota. And it's not just the geography, it's the story. We have different, Colombia has this kind of explosion of color in everything. It's not a stereotype, it's like that. We are not like that. And in literature, you can see it. If you read Borges and you read Garcia Marquez, they're both brilliant and they're completely different. They seem to come from different cultures because they do.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes different for people in other blocks of languages, let's say, to understand those kind of nuances and things. Latin America is all the same, and Latin America is not the same at all. On top of the biggest country not even speaking Spanish.
Yes. Yeah.
So the fact that she lived in Chile, and Chile has a very similar history with the dictatorship and with the things that, like, I often write about states, like this, the power of the state, that it's very repressive, because it's something that I know, and she understands too. And she understands what does to the mind of the people, how they accept it, how they are okay with it, how, you know, it's not that big of an issue that they're killing protesters because whatever it happens. And so that is very lucky.
And I think being bilingual does not make one bicultural. You can be bilingual and monocultural.
Exactly.
And there's a distinction there, which, as you said, you're very lucky that you had a translator who could navigate both cultures. I think it's a good moment to open the floor to our audience and have questions from the audience. I believe we've got roaming mics, is that right? So if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, we've got a hand that went right up here. And we've got a mic coming to you.
It's coming.
This lady here.
Maybe while we're waiting, I could just say one other thing which connects with what Mariana was saying about the different languages and cultures within Latin America. When you think about it, we have exactly the same thing in English. And this is something else that translators have to be very aware of. Is this going to be going mainly to an American audience or to a British audience or an Australian audience? And so when you're choosing your words in English, you do have to be aware also of that, because the wrong word from the wrong English can just totally destroy a sentence.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a question here.
Hola.
Hi.
Can I say this in Spanish?
Sure.
Primero quiero decir muchísimas gracias. Tenemos un pequeño club en Melbourne que empezó en el confinamiento.
Can I say?
Leemos.
Just
We have
translate
no, that's okay. I can say it in English.
Okay.
So we have a little book club that we started during the confinement in Melbourne, and we only read women that write in Spanish. And you've been one of the first ones that we have read.
Thank you.
So it's been really amazing, and that actually helped a lot during the COVID times that were really hard here. And that's also become something so big for us as a little group of Latin American women living here. In so many ways. So, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
For being a woman and for doing
I
such an
cannot.
amazing job. Because before starting this club, I actually thought there were not good women writers. Can you believe that? And then we realized that there were too many, and we didn't know about them. So we had to find them, and now that we have found them, it's been such a treasure and pleasure. So that was, and then I got a question, if I still can,
Sure.
for the translators. So I've noticed, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I've noticed that one of the translations mentioned something about the lights being the hunters, and I think that was something that was not in the text, in the original text. Before, so it was somehow given away.
Cazadoras, I think.
Exactly.
I think it was in there.
Well,
I
it might
think
be,
it was
yeah.
cazador. I think we had
this was
cazador.
my
memory.
first encounter with the text, so I might be wrong.
Of course.
But my question is, can that happen? Can you give something away before the actual text does it? Or are you very aware of not doing that?
Yes. Oh, I think
I
it
think
would
you
be
don't
terrible
want to do that.
if you were to give it away. No,
The suspense
absolutely.
is so
There we
important,
go.
especially in a story like this.
Yeah,
You know?
las
Yeah, we've got
cazadoras.
cazadores.
Cazadores.
Sorry, it's in there.
Cazadoras, hunters, yeah. There it is.
That's all right.
all good.
That's all right.
All good.
That's all right.
I
It's too
think
much
we've
to
got-
look at.
There's a lot
We've
of
got
text.
we've got lots of questions now. How do people
There was
choose
one in
which
the back. This is the next
Lily,
hand
do you
up.
choose? Like you have
Right, the
power.
one back there was his next hand up,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Thank you, because I haven't. The gentleman? there?
No, no,
this
the
lady?
person with the
Okay.
microphone
Yeah.
back there. The mic doesn't work.
Very interesting session, thank you very much. I was wondering where there's alliteration in the text or where there's rhyming words in the text and the words that you perhaps most naturally would pick in the language that you're translating to doesn't share, those characteristics. What do? Do you go, do you go searching for different words that perhaps would produce the alliteration or produce the sort of rhyming to get to convey that of the text? Or I suppose it's probably a balance, sometimes one, sometimes the other, but I'm just interested in you talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, if there is an option, you always go
you
with
would.
it.
Yeah.
But often there just isn't, and you just have to. I mean, I do a lot of compensation through kind of vibing it, kind of like, okay, I get what's going on here. Like maybe I can add some alliteration in, like elsewhere
Find
in
an
the sentence.
equivalent or
Yeah,
something.
or
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yes, you certainly do try to, but often, I mean, given that even the structure of the languages is so different, you may have to restructure the sentence in order to achieve that end. But yes, I mean, you would certainly try to find equivalence or something that would convey that same sense.
And in Spanish, lots of things rhyme,
Yes.
and they don't in English.
they don't in
so
English.
you're going to be,
Yeah.
it's going to be different. Yeah.
And sometimes you bow to the impossibility of what
Yeah.
cannot be done,
Yeah.
which
That's
is
right.
also true. Sometimes there are things you can't
Your
do.
version has things that the original can't achieve, and it balances out.
Phonetically, linguistically, there are
Yeah.
just things that can't be done from one language to another.
I mean, one of the other things that, particularly in Spanish, is a challenge, and I'll be interested to see if Alice agrees. Spanish, because the endings of the verbs tell you, in most cases, what or who the subject is, you don't need to use subject pronouns. And writers often enjoy playing games in that way by, let's say, not revealing the gender or something, because they don't need to say it. In English, it's very difficult to use a verb without a subject pronoun.
Actually,
So-
on that, I got a previous novel that I did. I kept getting the subject wrong because it was just the third person,
yeah.
and I was like, I guess this
Yeah.
person talking, and it was
Yeah.
and Mariana, another Mariana, was like, and no, this is this is someone else talking, and because it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah.
She's like, and there's no way for you to know that.
And
That's
I had a whole story that was written deliberately so that you would guess that it was a male and female couple that was talking.
You can't do it.
You can do
In
it.
English.
You can't do it in English,
you
I know.
can't do it.
And it wasn't even given away in the original. The original was actually in Catalan. And in Catalan, the male for Mario is actually M-A-R-I-A with an accent. So even the name in Catalan didn't necessarily give away the gender. But again, in Spanish, you eventually have to do it. But in a way, I'm in awe of the writers who will spend time in those cases looking for adjectives that don't give away the genders, finding ways of playing that game, which we poor translators basically can't play.
I believe we have 5 more minutes, is that right? 5. We've got 5 minutes. I don't want to be the one who chooses. Lily, do you
No,
choose?
you're
It's
the
them.
moderator.
This person over here, please. Yes. You, yes, right.
Hello. My question is, I've noticed in the different tones of each translator, I felt that Lilith's, yours had more, I suppose, maybe a humanitarian tone, and yours, Alice, more an authoritative, sharper tone. My observation is if there's a slight generational difference between the two translators and your context in knowing this as a dystopian story and your individual understandings of what a dystopian genre is, because of the time periods in which both of you grew up and had an understanding of the world. How do you think that that context of your life influences the tones in which you approach a dystopian genre?
I mean, every translator has their own set of reference points that they're bringing, whether, you know, from where they grew up, you know, most translators from Spanish are living in the US or the UK, so very rarely are Australians even called on. And we have different, I think generation definitely would, the kind of books that you've read, I mean, we've probably read a lot of the same books, but we've probably also read very different books.
And there's one other difference here. Alice mainly translates authors from Latin America. I mainly translate authors from Spain. So there's a huge difference there as well in terms of history, culture, language, backgrounds, and so on. So even that, in that sense, we're probably bringing different things. I mean, obviously Spain went through horrendous civil wars as well, dictatorships and so on, but it's a different context as well. Plus, as you say, you know, what each of our own contexts is. You know, I was born in Czechoslovakia, we escaped from communism. So, you know, that brings something to it that Alice might not have, but Alice will have something different that will contribute her perspective. But I think no matter what, often, I hope, in a way, that's subconsciously, because consciously you're dealing with someone else's text and context.
You're probably not really aware of these things. I think it's just part of how you, I mean, the same way that Mariana as a writer is very different from, I don't know, any other writer. So it's a very human kind of thing, translating something.
And also just a little thing, in my text, the one that speaks, it's the girl in the first person, so it's not really, she doesn't, her language is contaminated by the way she lives. So it's not that she has a more humanitarian or just the impression, but it's just her language is, she's confined also, so she gets things from many people. And she's educated because these people are perverse, and even if the people are going to die, they give them education just, I don't know why, I can't remember why. But, and also in Spanish, in Spain, they use the correct Spanish, that is tú eres, but you are, but our you are is vos sos.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the language, but even you can tell the difference between tú eres and vos sos. This is completely different. So someone that hasn't been exposed to the Spanish that we speak in Argentina and Uruguay only, and in some places of Colombia, and it's absolutely random where the voceo happens. And but it's a completely different text, and it influences the verb later that is kind of accentuated in the last syllable, like French. So it sounds complicated, but we understand each other in Latin America because, I don't know, there is something called generative grammar that we kind of, understand each other. But for a translator, if you only learn Spanish from Spain, it's like, what is going on? Why they're writing in the word?
You guys
why
have,
speaking in the third person?
You have three ways of saying you, whereas, and, even in English now, we don't distinguish anymore, or very rarely. You used to have a sort of a formal way of addressing elderly people, that sort of thing, but we didn't actually distinguish in the same way that they do in so many other languages. How do you convey that sense of respect if you're using that formal form of address? How do you do that in English if we don't have a way specifically of doing it?
In the grammar, not built in.
And I think that brings us to the end of the session. Can we please have a big round of applause for Thank you for their wonderful work, their excellent translations, and what a pleasure. And thanks to the Melbourne Writers Festival and AALITRA as well.
And to the moderator.
Thank you. I just sat here and had a chat. It was great. It was great. Thank you. All right. Go forth and read in translation.